Okay, welcome everyone. We're doing a deep dive today into a stack of sources we've pulled together.
Yeah, all focusing on the crypto market, sort of early June 2025.
It's a really interesting mix this time, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. We've got pieces here covering, well, everything from reports on potentially massive investment returns
Right.
to articles digging into market-moving economic data and, specific project developments.
Exactly. You've brought us this stack, and our mission really is to cut through all that noise
Mm,
and extract the most important knowledge, the key insights from these sources,
yeah.
specifically for you listening.
Think of it as a shortcut, right?
Yeah.
Getting you well informed on what these sources are actually highlighting right now.
And there are some genuinely surprising, maybe even startling nuggets in here.
Oh, yeah. One article, for instance, talks about an astounding 40,000% ROI, return on investment.
40,000%.
And
Seriously.
seriously. And it immediately asks, is that just pure luck? Or is there some serious tech behind it driving that?
That's the classic crypto question, isn't it?
It really is. And meanwhile, other sources are pointing to bigger market forces, economic indicators, strategic moves by key players.
Okay, that 40,000% return though, that number alone definitely grabs your attention. Let's unpack the stack and see what these sources really emphasize.
That's it.
So, starting with that headline grabber you mentioned, the source asking if FloppyPepe's success is more than just luck.
Right. And this one, it's presented as a guest post on CoinMarketCap, apparently.
Okay.
And it really hammers that 40,000% ROI figure. It's the hook.
It's the kind of number that just fuels the imagination in this market, right? Gets people talking.
Absolutely. But what's interesting, like you said, is how this source immediately pivots. It looks at the analysis of the tech behind FloppyPepe.
Ah, okay. So trying to see if there's substance.
Exactly. It raises that fundamental question analysts always grapple with in crypto. Is this kind of explosive growth? Is it truly driven by underlying tech or utility or real innovation?
Or is it just hype? Speculative luck.
Precisely. The source seems to suggest looking for those indicators, the signs of actual development activity.
Right. Finding substance behind the, well, spectacular number. Okay, but these sources, they don't just focus on individual moonshots, do they?
No, not at all. And that brings us to some of the broader market forces they discuss.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting, I think.
It does. You really see how much external factors influence crypto. Several sources point out the market is kind of holding its breath right now.
Waiting for something specific.
Yeah, waiting for the release of US CPI data. That's the Consumer Price Index.
Ah, the inflation measure. Right.
Exactly. And that's because, well, this data is widely seen as potentially affecting the Federal Reserve's interest rate decisions.
Right. If inflation comes in hotter or cooler than expected.
It could shift expectations. When will the Fed change rates? If they'll change rates.
And that hits broader financial markets, obviously, including crypto.
Definitely. It's a clear reminder, macroeconomics isn't just background noise here. It really matters.
Okay, so we've got the big economic signals. What else?
Well, alongside that, the sources also dive into specific major players and even individual high-stakes actions.
Like what?
They mentioned Bitcoin, obviously. But specifically, they highlight James Wynn's bold move, opening a high-risk position using 40x leverage on BTC.
40 times leverage. Wow.
Okay.
Okay, just quickly, for anyone maybe not deep in trading terms,
Yeah.
40x leverage means you're borrowing like 39 times your own money to make a much bigger bet,
That's it. It magnifies potential gains incredibly.
but also potential losses
Yeah,
by 40 times.
exactly. And as the sources note, that kind of move, it's definitely going to stir up market discussions.
I bet it raises serious questions about risk appetite right now, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a real example of those high conviction but also high risk trading decisions that can influence sentiment.
Okay. So BTC leverage.
Yeah.
What other coins are mentioned?
Moving on, XRP is showing price volatility according to these sources.
Okay, XRP. What are they saying about it?
Analysts in these particular sources are providing insights into its key resistance levels.
Ah, the technicals. Price ceilings where selling might kick in.
Right. And also just the current market sentiment around XRP, specifically now in June 2025.
Gotcha. So a snapshot of XRP's situation. What else is in the mix?
Then there's significant news from the stablecoin world. The sources cover a statement from Tether CEO Paolo Ardoino on June 7th.
Okay, Tether. What did he say?
Well, he stated quite clearly, apparently, that the company has no plans to go public, no IPO.
No initial public offering? That's interesting.
Yeah, unlike a traditional company listing on a stock exchange. And it provides a really sharp contrast to their competitor, Circle.
Right, because Circle recently did go public on the NYSE, didn't they?
They did. New York Stock Exchange. So, yeah, a very different strategy there.
That contrast between the two stablecoin giants is pretty striking. Was there anything else specific from the Tether CEO's comments?
Yes, actually.
Huh.
A specific, maybe surprising detail the sources picked up on. He apparently said a $515 billion valuation for Tether.
$500 billion almost.
A bit bearish.
A bit bearish. Wow, okay.
Yeah. It certainly gives you a sense of their internal confidence, maybe, about Tether's scale and importance, even while opting out of that public market path.
Definitely sends a message. Okay, so that's stablecoins. What about the altcoin landscape? The sources touch on that too, right?
They do. It's actually described as a pivotal month for altcoin watchers this June 2025.
Pivotal how?
Well, the emphasis here isn't just on those quick price spikes you often see with altcoins.
The pump and dumps sometimes.
Right. Instead, it's on what the sources are calling real signals,
Real signals, meaning?
meaning things like ongoing development, actual utility, expanding ecosystems.
The network effect. Projects building on it, users actually using it.
Exactly. That focus on fundamentals, according to these sources, is key for looking at long-term potential.
Makes sense? Are they naming names?
They are. They specifically list several altcoins they see as gaining serious ground based on these real signals.
Okay, who's on the list?
Blockdag, Cosmos, Aptos, and Ava.
Blockdag, Cosmos, Aptos, Aave. Got it.
Yeah, these are presented as projects with, underlying activity and development that's worth paying attention to beyond just the day-to-day price action.
So analysts are specifically pointing to these names when they talk about potential substance, not just hype, in the altcoin space right now. Interesting.
And there's one final altcoin mentioned in the sources. It's about SUI.
SUI, what about it?
Just a note about a SUI price prediction for 2026.
Looking further out.
Yeah. And the sources mention mixed sentiment around it, apparently after something described as a hack fallout.
A security incident. That can definitely impact sentiment.
For sure. And then kind of abruptly, actually, the source includes this phrase. Meanwhile, Quebec's wallet arch?
Quebec's wallet arch. And that's it.
That's pretty much it. It seems to hint at some potential development, maybe an architectural change related to a wallet, perhaps linked to recovery or future security after the hack.
But the sources don't elaborate much further on that specific point.
No, not really. It's one of those intriguing but slightly unfinished threads you sometimes find.
Right. It is interesting how the sources jump from, broad market sentiment down to these very specific, sometimes quite technical details like that. So, stepping back, what does this all mean when you look at these varied sources together? How do we synthesize this for you?
Well, when you put all this information together, you really see a crypto market that's incredibly complex. It's driven by so many different forces all at the same time.
Yeah, it's definitely not monolithic.
Not at all. You've got the potential for these massive, almost unbelievable speculative returns, like that 40,000% from FloppyPep.
Which immediately makes analysts ask, okay, is this real tech or just pure hype?
Exactly. And then pushing against that, or maybe alongside it, you have the very tangible influence of major macroeconomic events, like everyone waiting for US CPI data.
Because that affects Fed policy, which ripples through the whole market, impacting investor decisions.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you see how individual actions, even high-stakes ones, like that 40x leverage BTC trade, they can stir discussion, highlight the element of significant risk-taking that's happening.
Right. And then you've got the big players making strategic moves, like Tether saying no IPO for us. That reshapes parts of the ecosystem.
It does. And then, kind of underpinning some parts of the market, you have this focused attention on the fundamentals.
The real signals we talked about.
Yeah, the ongoing development, the expanding ecosystems of specific altcoins like Blockday, Cosmos, Aptos, and Aave. Analysts are trying to sift through the noise and find that substance.
So yeah, this stack of sources really shows you all the different layers. Macroeconomics, corporate strategy, individual high-risk bets, underlying tech development, and just sheer speculative hype.
They're all influencing the picture you're seeing right now. It's a lot to track.
Okay, so summing up, we've pulled out some really interesting threads from these sources for you today. There's that compelling question, hype versus tech, sparked by examples of massive ROI.
Right. Then there's the very real impact of external economic data, like CPI, and also specific large trades influencing market sentiment.
And don't forget the strategic moves and that focus on development happening within different corners of the crypto world, from stablecoins like Tether to those individual altcoin projects trying to build real substance.
Yeah, looking at these varied sources together, it really does give you a much richer, more nuanced picture of the market.
Definitely better than just reading a single headline or article.
For sure. It helps you see the connections, the different kinds of forces pulling and pushing.
It certainly does. And it leaves you with a lot to think about, doesn't it? About how this market actually works.
Hmm.
So here's a final thought for you to mull over. In a market that seems driven by so many different, sometimes conflicting forces, you've got global macroeconomic policy, you've got the slow burn of project development progress, you have sheer speculative hype, those massive gains fueling excitement, and then the high-stakes decisions of big traders.
All happening at once.
Exactly. So which of these factors do you think is ultimately the most powerful? Which one really shapes outcomes, like that massive 40,000% ROI figure we saw mentioned in the sources? Something to consider.